The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but Kate Morrison didn't notice. Her eyes stayed fixed on the computer screen in front of her, watching the same pattern repeat over and over. She had been working at the radio telescope facility in New Mexico for 6 years now, and in all that time, she had never seen anything like this. Most days at the search for extraterrestrial intelligence were boring. The computers recorded cosmic noise, random bursts from distant stars, and nothing that meant anything. Kate and her team would review the data, mark down anything unusual, and move on. It was patient work, the kind that required you to accept that you might spend your entire career finding nothing at all. But this was different. The signal had started coming through 3 hours ago, right around midnight. At first, Kate thought it was interference from a satellite or maybe a problem with their equipment. But as she analyzed it more carefully, she realized it wasn't random at all. It had structure. It repeated in mathematical patterns. And it was coming from a point in space 42 light-years away. Kate's hands shook as she typed commands into her computer. She ran the signal through every filter and test she could think of. Each time, the results came back the same. This was artificial. Someone or something had sent this message on purpose. "Jake," she called out, her voice cracking with excitement and fear. "Jake, get in here right now." Jake Sullivan walked into the observation room carrying a sandwich and looking annoyed at being interrupted during his break. He was Kate's colleague and closest friend at the facility. They had worked together for 4 years, sharing the long night shifts and the endless disappointment of finding nothing but silence from the stars. "This better be good," Jake said. But he stopped talking when he saw Kate's face. She looked pale and her eyes were wide. "What's wrong?" "Listen to this," Kate said, and she played the signal through the speakers. At first, it just sounded like static with a strange rhythm to it. But as Jake listened, he started to hear it too. There was a pattern. A pulse that repeated every few seconds with variations that seemed deliberate and controlled. "That's not natural," Jake said quietly. He set his sandwich down and moved closer to the screen. "How long has this been coming in?" 3 hours. "And Jake, there's more." Kate pulled up another screen showing the decoded data. "I ran it through our translation programs. It contains mathematical sequences, coordinates in space, and something else. Biological information. Chemical formulas. I think they're telling us about themselves?" Jake stared at the data for a long moment. His face went through several expressions, from disbelief to excitement to something that looked like fear. "We need to call the director. Right now." Within 30 minutes, the entire facility was awake and crowded into the observation room. The director, a stern man named Dr. George Palmer, looked at the data with his arms crossed. Other scientists pressed close, arguing about what they were seeing, running their own tests and calculations. "It's definitely artificial," confirmed Dr. Linda Hayes, their senior analyst. "And if these coordinates are accurate, it's coming from a star system we've been watching for years. Red giant star, approaching the end of its life cycle. We've logged several planets there, including 2 that might be in the habitable zone." "Might have been habitable," corrected another scientist. "That star is dying fast. Any planets there would be cooking by now." Kate pulled up more of the decoded information. "Look at this section here. These are distress patterns. The same signals that ships use on Earth when they're in trouble. And here they're showing us a countdown. We have approximately 3 months before something happens to them." The room went quiet. Everyone understood what they were looking at now. This wasn't just first contact with alien life. This was a distress call. Someone out there was dying, and they were begging for help. Dr. Palmer took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "We need to contact the government. The United Nations. This is way beyond our authority to handle." The next 72 hours passed in a blur. Government officials arrived at the facility. Intelligence agencies got involved. The signal was verified, tested, and verified again. Experts from around the world flew in to examine the data. And slowly, the truth of what they had received became clear. The aliens called themselves the Varani. The biological data they sent showed they were carbon-based life forms, Similar to humans in some ways but adapted to different gravity and light conditions. Their planet orbited a red giant star that had entered its death phase earlier than their scientists had predicted. The environmental collapse was happening too fast. Their escape plans had failed. Their evacuation. Ships couldn't carry everyone off-world in time. They were sending out a desperate message to anyone who might be listening. They included everything they could about themselves, their location, their biology, their situation. It was a cry for help thrown out into the darkness. Hoping against hope that someone would hear and care, the Varani had a population of approximately 4 million individuals. Their message contained images of their world, showing beautiful cities being torn apart by massive storms, oceans that were boiling away, and a blood-red sun that grew larger and angrier in their sky every day. They showed images of their people, tall and graceful beings with skin that seemed to glow with soft light. They showed their families, their children, their elderly. They were dying and they knew it. How did they even know to send the message to us? Jake asked one evening as he and Kate reviewed the data for the 100th time. Earth is 42 light-years away. They couldn't have known we were here. They didn't, Kate said softly. Look at the signal pattern. They're broadcasting in all directions, using as much power as they can generate. This message is going out to every star system within 100 light-years. They're just hoping anyone, will hear them. And we did. Yeah, we did. The news couldn't be kept secret for long. Within a week, someone leaked information to the media. Within 2 weeks, the entire world knew. Humanity had received its first message from aliens. And it was a distress call. The response from Earth was immediate and overwhelming. Every news channel showed the images from the Varani message. Scientists went on television to explain what they knew. Religious leaders debated what this meant for their faiths. Politicians argued about what humanity should do. Commander Ryan Blake was assigned to lead a special task force called the Space Response Coalition. He was a decorated military officer with experience in disaster response and space operations. The government chose him because he had a reputation for making hard decisions under pressure. Ryan stood in front of the United Nations General Assembly and laid out the facts. We have the technology to reach them, he said, his voice steady and calm. Our experimental faster-than-light drive was designed for deep space exploration. It's never been tested at this distance or with this many ships, but the scientists believe it will work. We can build a fleet large enough to evacuate the Varani people. The question we have to answer is simple. Will we do it? The debate that followed was fierce and divided the entire world. Senator Lisa Grant became the voice of the opposition. She argued her case in front of packed congressional halls and on news programs that reached billions of viewers. We have problems here on Earth that we haven't solved, she said. People are starving. We have wars and poverty and climate change threatening our own survival. How can we justify spending trillions of dollars to save aliens we've never met? How can we risk human lives on a mission this dangerous when we have so many needs at home? Her supporters organized rallies and protests. They carried signs that said, Earth first and charity begins at home. They weren't cruel people. They were scared and overwhelmed by problems that seemed impossible to solve. The idea of taking on someone else's crisis felt like too much, but there was another side to the debate. Ambassador Alex Chun spoke passionately before the United Nations. He was a diplomat who had spent his career trying to solve conflicts and help refugees from war-torn regions. I understand the concerns about cost and resources, he said. But I ask you to think about what this moment means. Humanity has spent our entire existence wondering if we're alone in the universe. Now we know we're not. And our first contact is with people who are begging us for help. If we turn our backs on them, if we let them die when we have the power to save them, what does that say about who we are? His words resonated with millions of people. Protests formed on both sides now. Some carried signs opposing the rescue mission. Others held vigils with candles and messages of hope for the Varani people they had never met. Church groups organized prayer services. Student organizations held rallies on college campuses. The images from the Varani message kept playing on screens everywhere. People saw the alien families huddled together as storms destroyed their cities. They saw the Varani children, so different from human children but recognizable in their innocence and fear. They saw a civilization facing the end of everything they had ever known. Then the second message arrived. It came through the same channel, but this time it was different. The Varani weren't just asking for help anymore. They were saying goodbye. They sent their entire cultural database, everything they had created, and the decision to launch a rescue mission created chaos around the world, but it was organized chaos with a purpose. Money and resources poured in from governments, corporations, and millions of ordinary people. Scientists and engineers who had spent their careers on different projects suddenly found themselves working together on the biggest construction project humanity had ever attempted. The Space Response Coalition built 6 massive ships in orbital shipyards above Earth. Each vessel was designed to carry cargo, equipment, and refugees across impossible distances. They named the ships Endeavor, Horizon, Unity, Compass, Pathway, and Lighthouse. Each name represented hope, guidance, and the human drive to explore and help. Building the ships took 8 weeks of constant work. Crews worked around the clock in shifts that never stopped. Supply rockets launched from Earth every few hours, carrying materials, equipment, and the thousands of workers needed to assemble everything in orbit. It was dangerous work. 3 people died in construction accidents. Dozens more were injured. But the work never stopped. Captain Nicole Hayes received her assignment to command the flagship Endeavor 4 weeks before launch. She was a military pilot with 15 years of experience, including 5 years commanding space stations and orbital operations. Nicole had a reputation for staying calm under pressure and making smart decisions when things went wrong. She was also known for caring deeply about her crew and never asking them to do anything she wouldn't do herself. When Commander Ryan Blake offered her the position, Nicole didn't hesitate. "I'm in," she said simply. "When do we leave?" 8 weeks. "We're still building the ships." "Then I better get to work choosing my crew." Nicole selected 800 people to serve on the Endeavor. They came from 60 different nations and spoke dozens of languages, though everyone was required to be fluent in English and at least one other major language. She chose pilots, engineers, doctors, scientists, and specialists in everything from agriculture to computer systems. Every person had volunteered, knowing the risks, knowing they might not come back. Dr. Ben Carter was one of the first people Nicole recruited. He was the lead engineer who had designed the experimental faster-than-light drive that would make the journey possible. Ben was only 32 years old, but he was already considered one of the brightest minds in theoretical physics and engineering. He had spent the last 7 years of his life working on FTL technology, first as a graduate student and then as part of a classified government research program. "The engines will work," Ben told Nicole during their first meeting. "I'm confident about that. What I'm not confident about is what happens if something goes wrong at FTL speeds. We've tested the drives in simulations and short test flights, but never across this distance and never with ships this large." "So what are you saying?" Nicole asked. "I'm saying there's risk. Real risk. If the drive fails during the journey, we could be stranded in deep space with no way to get home or reach the Varani. If it fails catastrophically, the ship could be torn apart. We've done everything we can to make it safe, but this is experimental technology being used in ways it was never tested for." Nicole studied the young engineer carefully. "Are you trying to talk me out of going?" "No," Ben said firmly. "I'm trying to make sure you understand what we're attempting, because I'm going with you. I designed this system, and if something goes wrong, I'm the person most likely to be able to fix it. I just want you to know the truth about what we're doing." "I appreciate that." "How many of the other engineers know about these risks?" "All of them. Everyone working on the FTL systems knows what we're attempting and what could go wrong. They're all still here." Nicole smiled. "Then we'll make it work. That's what humans do. We figure out impossible problems." Kate Morrison also joined the crew of the Endeavor. She was the scientist who had first received the Varani distress signal and she felt responsible for seeing the mission through. Kate wasn't a doctor or engineer, but her expertise in analyzing the Varani communications made her valuable to the mission. She would help the crew understand anything new the Varani sent and assist with first contact protocols. Jake Sullivan volunteered to go with her. The two scientists had been friends for years, and Jake wasn't about to let Kate make this journey alone. He joined the communications team, working on systems that would let humans and Varani talk to each other despite having completely different languages and ways of thinking. Dr. Sophie Martinez signed up as the chief medical officer for the endeavor. She was a surgeon with experience in emergency medicine and disaster response. Sophie had worked in war zones and refugee camps, dealing with mass casualties and impossible situations. When she heard about the mission, she knew her skills would be needed. "They're going to be sick and injured," Sophie told her colleagues who questioned her decision to go. "They're evacuating a dying planet. They'll need medical care, and we need to understand their biology well enough to help them. This is exactly what I trained for." Sophie assembled a medical team of 40 doctors, nurses, and specialists. They spent weeks studying the biological data the Varani had sent, trying to understand how their bodies worked and what medical care they might need. It was like learning to be a doctor all over again, but for a completely different species. Lieutenant Chris Blake served as the tactical officer on the Unity, one of the other ships in the fleet. He was Commander Ryan Blake's twin brother, and the two men looked so similar that people often mixed them up. But while Ryan coordinated the mission from Earth, Chris wanted to be out there with the ships, making a direct difference. "Someone has to keep you safe," Chris told Nicole when he reported for duty. "We don't know what we're going to find out there. The Varani seem peaceful, but there could be other dangers. Pirates, hostile aliens, who knows, better to be prepared." Chris assembled security teams for all 6 ships. They weren't there to fight, but to handle any emergencies that might come up during such a long and dangerous journey. He hoped they wouldn't be needed, but he made sure everyone was trained and ready just in case. The 6 ships slowly took shape in orbit above Earth. They were enormous, each one over a kilometer long and designed to operate as self-contained communities during the journey. They had living quarters, medical facilities, engineering spaces, cargo holds, and massive passenger areas that could be reconfigured to hold the Varani refugees. The FTL drives were mounted at the rear of each ship, huge assemblies of exotic materials and technology that most people didn't really understand. Ben Carter and his engineering teams checked every connection, every power relay, every system a dozen times. There could be no mistakes? Not with lives depending on the technology working perfectly. As launch day approached, billions of people watched the preparations. News cameras showed the ships being loaded with supplies, medical equipment, food, water, construction materials, and everything else they might need. The cargo manifests were public, and people could see exactly what humanity was sending to help the Varani people. But not everyone was happy about the mission. Senator Lisa Grant continued to speak out against the operation. She appeared on news programs and gave speeches warning about the costs and risks. "We're sending 6 of our most advanced ships away from Earth at a time when we need them here," she argued. "What if something happens while they're gone? What if we face our own crisis? These resources should be used to solve problems at home." Her supporters held protests outside the space centers and government buildings. Some of the protests turned angry, with people shouting at workers and crew members. Security had to be increased around the launch facilities, but the mission continued anyway. 3 days before launch, Commander Ryan Blake brought all 6 ship captains together for a final briefing. They met in a conference room on the orbital station where the ships were docked. Besides Nicole Hayes, there was Captain James Mitchell of the Horizon, Captain Lisa Freeman of the Unity, Captain Paul Torres of the Compass, Captain Angela Park of the Pathway, and Captain Stephen Grant of the Lighthouse. "This is going to be the most difficult thing any of us have ever done," Ryan told them. "You're going to be traveling for 6 weeks at FTL speeds. When you arrive at the Varani system, you'll have limited time to evacuate 4 million people before their planet becomes uninhabitable. Everything has to work perfectly, and we all know that nothing ever works perfectly. He paused and looked at each captain in turn. You're going to have to make hard decisions out there. Decisions I can't help you with because the distance is too great for real-time communication. Once you leave, you're on your own. Trust your training, trust your crews, and trust each other. Work together and you can do this. Nicole spoke up. What about backup plans? If something goes wrong, what are our options? Limited, Ryan admitted. We're sending everything we have on this mission. There are no reserve ships standing by. If you need help, you'll have to help each other. That's why all 6 ships need to work as a unified fleet. The captain spent hours going over procedures, communication protocols, and emergency plans. They discussed what to do if ships got separated. If systems failed, if they encountered unexpected dangers. They talked about the Varani themselves and how to handle first contact. The first week of the journey passed in a state of controlled chaos as the crews adjusted to life traveling faster than light. The ships ran smoothly enough, but everyone needed time to get used to the strange sensations and the impossible views outside the windows. Some people felt sick, others couldn't sleep. But gradually, routines developed and people found their rhythm. Nicole ran daily briefings with her senior officers, going over system status, crew welfare, and preparations for what they would face when they arrived. The meetings were efficient and focused, but she made sure to leave time for concerns and questions. Leadership during a mission like this required listening as much as directing. Ben Carter practically lived in the engineering spaces. He monitored the FTL drive constantly, watching for any signs of instability or problems. The technology was holding up perfectly so far, but he knew that could change at any moment. His team ran simulations and practiced emergency procedures, preparing for every failure scenario they could imagine. The drive is performing better than expected, Ben told Nicole during one of their check-ins. We might actually arrive a few days early at this rate. That's good news, Nicole said. Every day matters for the Varani. What about the other ships? How are their drives holding up? All good, according to the data they're sending us. We're exchanging telemetry every few hours and everyone's systems are stable. The pathway is running slightly hot on their secondary power coupling, but it's within acceptable limits. Captain Park knows about it and her engineers are monitoring it. Kate Morrison spent her time studying everything they knew about the Varani. She reviewed their language patterns, trying to understand how they communicated. She analyzed their cultural database, learning about their art, their history, their values. The more she learned, the more she realized how tragic their situation was. The Varani were a peaceful species that had never known war. Their entire civilization had developed around cooperation and shared knowledge. They had explored their star system but never developed FTL travel. When they realized their sun was dying faster than predicted, they tried to evacuate to other planets in their system, but the environmental collapse happened too quickly. They were trapped, watching everything they had built fall apart while they begged the universe for help. They're good people, Kate told Jake one evening in the observation lounge. They sat together watching the strange patterns of FTL space through the windows. I mean, I know we shouldn't romanticize them. They're alien, and they probably have problems and flaws just like any society. But everything in their cultural data shows a species that values life and learning and taking care of each other. Makes you wonder why bad things happen to good people, Jake said quietly. Or good aliens, I guess. Yeah, it does. Dr. Sophie Martinez trained her medical staff on what they knew about Varani biology. It was challenging because they only had data from the messages, not actual patients to examine. But she worked with what she had, creating treatment protocols and preparing for the medical emergencies they would likely face. Their biology is similar to ours in basic structure, Sophie explained to her team. They have organs that function like hearts and lungs, they have circulatory systems, they need to eat and breathe. But the details are different. Their blood uses a different kind of protein to carry oxygen, more efficient than ours but also more fragile. They're adapted to lower gravity, so Earth normal gravity would be hard on them. They need different light conditions. What about diseases? One of the nurses asked. Could we make them sick? Could they make us sick? Unknown. We're biologically different enough that cross-species infection seems unlikely, but we'll take precautions anyway. Full protective gear when working with them until we know more. We can't afford to accidentally harm them or ourselves. The days passed and the crews fell into routines. People worked their shifts, ate meals together in the cafeterias, exercised in the gym spaces, and found ways to relax during their off hours. Some read books or watched movies. Others played games or just talked. The ships felt crowded with 800 people living in close quarters. But everyone made it work. Nicole made a point of walking through the ship every day, talking to crew members at all levels. She learned names and faces. She asked about people's families back on Earth. She listened to concerns and celebrated small victories. It was the kind of leadership she believed in. Staying connected to the people she commanded. 3 weeks into the journey, they received a scheduled transmission from Earth. Because of the FTL travel, the communication was strange and delayed, but they could still exchange messages with home. Commander Ryan Blake's face appeared on the screen, though the image was distorted and the sound had odd echoes. "All ships, this is Earth Control," Ryan's voice said. "We're reading your telemetry and everything looks good from our end. The world is watching and waiting. We believe in you. We're all counting on you to make this work." Blake out. Nicole recorded a response, knowing it would take days to reach Earth in their current state of travel. "Earth Control, this is Endeavor. All 6 ships are operating normally. Crews are prepared and eager to help the Varani. We'll contact you again at the next scheduled interval. Haze out." The message felt inadequate somehow, but what could she really say? They were committed to this mission. Either they would succeed or they would fail. Words wouldn't change that. At the 3-week mark, disaster struck. The Pathway's FTL drive experienced a sudden power fluctuation. Warning alarms screamed through the engineering spaces. Captain Angela Park and her crew scrambled to diagnose the problem while the ship shuddered and the lights flickered. Chief Engineer Megan Foster stared at her instruments in horror as she realized what was happening. "The primary power coupling is failing," she shouted over the alarms. "It's the same one that was running hot. We have to shut down the FTL drive right now or it's going to tear itself apart. If we shut down out here, we'll be stranded." Someone yelled back. "If we don't shut down, we'll be dead." "Do it now." Captain Park made the decision in seconds. "Shut it down. Emergency stop procedures." "Do it." The Pathway dropped out of FTL space violently, the sudden transition throwing people against walls and sending equipment flying. The ship appeared in normal space between stars, surrounded by the vast, empty darkness of interstellar void. They were alone, billions of miles from anything. The other 5 ships continued on, unaware of what had happened. The time dilation effects of FTL travel meant that by the time the Pathway's emergency signal could reach them in normal space, they would be long gone on the Pathway. Emergency lights cast everything in red. People picked themselves up, checking for injuries. The medical team rushed to help the wounded. Megan Foster and her engineers immediately began assessing the damage to the FTL drive. Captain Park stood on her bridge, looking at the damage reports coming in. Several injuries, some serious, but none fatal. The ship was intact, life support was functioning, and they weren't in immediate danger. But the FTL drive was offline, and they were stranded in the middle of nowhere. "How bad is it?" Park asked Megan. The engineer pulled up schematics on her tablet, her face grim. "Bad, but not impossible. The primary power coupling burned out completely. We have spares, but replacing it is going to take time. We're talking days, maybe a week of work. And we'll have to do it carefully because if we make a mistake, the drive won't function at all. Can we catch up to the fleet? Maybe, if we can get the drive working again and push it to maximum safe speed, we might be able to reach the Varani system before the evacuation is complete. But it'll be close." Park looked at the faces of her crew. They were scared but determined. "All right, everyone. We knew this mission was dangerous. Now we're in a real emergency situation, and we have to handle it. Engineering teams, start working on that drive replacement. Medical, take care of the injured. Everyone else, I want damage reports and status updates from every section of the ship. We're going to fix this, and we're going to catch up. The fleet is counting on us, and the Varani need every ship we can bring them. Meanwhile, on the other 5 ships, they continued on unaware of the pathway's problems. The time dilation and distance made real-time communication impossible. They wouldn't know anything was wrong until they exited FTL space at their destination. The 4th week brought new challenges for the crews. Living in close quarters for extended periods created stress and tension. Small disagreements became bigger arguments. People got tired of the same food and the same routines. Nicole and the other captains had to deal with discipline issues and morale problems. Sophie, Martinez saw the stress affecting people's health. We're seeing increased reports of anxiety, sleep problems, and minor conflicts, she told Nicole. It's normal for a mission like this, but we need to manage it before it becomes a bigger problem. What do you recommend? More social activities. Recreation time. Maybe organize some competitions or entertainment events. People need ways to blow off steam and feel connected to each other. Right now, the mission feels very abstract. We're traveling through impossible space toward a crisis we can barely imagine. That's hard on people psychologically. Nicole took the advice and worked with the other department heads too. The sight of the Varani system was beautiful and terrible at the same time. The massive red sun cast everything in crimson light that made the human crews feel like they were looking at a wound in space. The planet below showed clear signs of dying. Massive storms covered half the visible surface, their clouds swirling in patterns that looked angry and desperate. The oceans reflected the red sunlight like blood, but what caught everyone's attention were the spacecraft. Thousands of small vessels surrounded the planet, orbiting in loose formations. Some looked damaged, others appeared to be barely functional. They were evacuation ships, but clearly not enough of them and not capable of carrying everyone to safety. "My God," Kate Morrison whispered, staring at the view screen. "There are so many of them." Nicole activated the communication systems. "This is Captain Nicole Hayes of the human vessel Endeavour. Commanding a fleet of rescue ships from Earth, we received your distress signal. We're here to help. Please respond." There was a long moment of silence. The human crews waited, barely breathing, wondering if the Varani had already abandoned hope, or if something had gone wrong. Maybe they were too late. Maybe the Varani were already gone. Then the speakers crackled to life. The voice that came through was unlike anything the humans had ever heard. It had a musical quality, rising and falling in patterns that seemed to carry emotion as much as meaning. The translation systems worked to convert it into English, creating a strange overlay of alien sounds and human words. "Endeavour, this is eldest Kiara of Varan. You came. We did not dare to hope. We sent our message into the void expecting nothing, but you came." On the view screen, an image appeared. The Varani leader stood before the camera, and the humans got their first real look at an alien being. Kiara was tall, perhaps 7 feet by human measurements, with a slender build that suggested lower gravity evolution. Her skin had a quality that seemed to glow softly, shifting through subtle colors. Right now, she showed deep blue patterns that the cultural database indicated meant gratitude mixed with sorrow. "We're here to evacuate your people," Nicole said, keeping her voice steady despite the emotion she felt. "We have 5 ships currently in system, each capable of carrying hundreds of thousands of passengers. A 6th ship experienced problems during the journey but should arrive soon. Tell us what you need, and we'll make it happen." Kiara's skin color shifted, showing patterns that might have been surprise or disbelief. "You came to save us, all of us? We number 4 million souls. The journey to your world must have been incredibly difficult and dangerous. Why would you take such risks for strangers?" Nicole thought about all the debates and arguments that had happened on Earth. She thought about the protests and the opposition, but she also thought about the little girl who started a crowdfunding campaign and the billions of ordinary people who donated whatever they could because they wanted to help. "Because you asked for help," Nicole said simply. "Because life is precious, and we have the ability to save yours. That's enough reason for us." Kiara was silent for a moment, her colors shifting through patterns the humans didn't yet understand. When she spoke again, her voice carried weight that transcended the translation. "We are honored beyond words. We will remember this for all generations to come. Please tell us how we can assist with the evacuation." The next hours were a blur of intense activity. The 5 human ships moved into orbit around Varan, positioning themselves to maximize efficiency. Kate Morrison and Jake Sullivan worked frantically to establish better communication protocols, teaching the translation systems to handle Varani language patterns more accurately. The Varani sent up detailed information about their population, their locations, and their needs. Most of their people were concentrated in 3 major cities, though there were scattered settlements and research stations around the planet. The environmental collapse had already forced millions to relocate from coastal areas as the oceans boiled away. Ben Carter and his engineering team discovered their next challenge. The Varani ships were designed for their biology, with lower gravity and different atmospheric conditions. The human ships would need modifications to safely carry Varani passengers for the long journey home. "We need to create sections with adjustable gravity," Ben told Nicole. "And we need to modify the life support to handle their atmospheric requirements. It's doable, but it's going to take time we don't really have." "How long?" "Working around the clock with all available personnel. Maybe 36 hours to make the minimum necessary modifications, another day or 2 to do it properly." Nicole looked at the reports coming in from the planet's surface. The environmental situation was deteriorating fast. They had weeks at most before Varan became completely uninhabitable, but every day that passed made conditions worse for the people still there. "Do the minimum modifications in 24 hours, Nicole decided. "We start evacuating people immediately after that. We can make further improvements during the evacuation process." The human crews threw themselves into the work. Engineers from all 5 ships coordinated their efforts, sharing designs and solutions. They worked in shifts that never stopped, welding, rewiring, and reconfiguring vast sections of the ships to accommodate alien passengers. Dr. Sophie Martinez led teams down to the planet's surface to establish medical stations. The Varani government provided transportation, and Sophie got her first close look at the alien world. Despite the storms and the environmental collapse, she could see the beauty that must have once existed here. The architecture was elegant and flowing, designed to work with nature rather than dominate it. Even in crisis, the Varani maintained order and grace. "Their cities are incredible," Sophie told her team as they set up equipment in a large building that served as an evacuation center. "But you can see the damage everywhere, buildings cracked by earthquakes, streets flooded, infrastructure failing. These people are living through a nightmare." The first Varani families arrived at the evacuation center, and Sophie got to examine actual patients rather than just data. They were graceful beings, moving with an economy of motion that came from evolving in lower gravity. Their large eyes were adapted to dimmer light, and many of them wore protective coverings against the increasingly harsh conditions outside. Many of the Varani showed signs of illness from the environmental stress, respiratory problems from the changing atmosphere, injuries from structural collapses, psychological trauma from watching their world die. Sophie and her team worked to treat everyone they could while also learning more about Varani biology in real time. "They're remarkably similar to us in basic structure," Sophie explained to her staff. "But there are important differences. Their bones are lighter, more fragile by our standards. They heal faster than humans, but they're also more vulnerable to trauma. Be gentle when handling them, and always support their weight properly." Kate Morrison spent hours talking with Varani scientists and cultural leaders, learning everything she could about their society. Despite facing extinction, the Varani remained remarkably generous with their knowledge. They shared scientific discoveries, artistic traditions, and philosophical insights freely. "We want something of our civilization to survive," explained a Varani scholar named Elder Valen. "Even if we all perish, we hope that others will remember us through what we created and learned. Your arrival gives us hope that we might survive as well, but we still want to share everything we are." You're not going to perish, Kate told him firmly. We're going to save all of you, every single person. Valen's skin colors shifted to show what might have been hope mixed with doubt. That would be a miracle beyond measure. We have lived with the certainty of death for so long. It is hard to believe in miracles anymore. After 24 hours of non-stop work, the human ships were ready to begin taking passengers. The evacuation was organized by the Varani authorities, who maintained impressive order despite the crisis. Families were kept together. The elderly and young received priority. Medical cases got immediate attention. The first group of Varani boarded the Endeavour through specially modified airlocks. They moved slowly and carefully, unused to the confined spaces of the human ship. Many of them showed obvious fear, their skin colors betraying their anxiety. Despite their calm demeanor, Nicole stood at the entrance to greet them personally. She had studied enough of Varani culture to know that personal connection mattered to them deeply. Each family that came aboard, she acknowledged them, welcomed them, and assured them they were safe. You're safe now, she told a Varani mother carrying a small child. We're going to take care of you, I promise. The mother's skin showed colors that meant gratitude so profound it was almost worship. Thank you, she said in carefully practiced English. Thank you for our lives. The process was slow at first as both humans and Varani learned how to work together, but it gradually became more efficient. The ships began to fill with passengers. The human crews showed remarkable patience and compassion, helping scared aliens settle into unfamiliar spaces, explaining systems that must have seemed bizarre to them, and offering comfort where they could. Lieutenant Chris Blake coordinated the security and logistics aspects of the evacuation. The next 12 hours were a frenzy of activity as the human crews worked to find solutions to an impossible problem. Ben Carter and his engineering teams analyzed every system, looking for ways to reduce weight, increase capacity, and extend life support beyond rated limits. Dr. Sophie Martinez calculated minimum survival requirements, figuring out how little space, air, and food they could get away with for the journey home. Every department looked for places to cut corners without killing everyone aboard. We can reduce gravity in certain sections even further, Ben reported during an emergency briefing. It'll be uncomfortable for the Varani and dangerous for humans working in those areas, but it'll let us pack people tighter. We can also put some passengers into a light form of suspended animation for the journey. Not full cryo sleep, but a reduced metabolic state that cuts resource usage by half. How many could we fit with those changes? Nicole asked. Another 200,000 across all 5 ships. Maybe 250,000 if we really push it. Nicole did the math in her head. 3 million already aboard. Maybe 250,000 more with extreme modifications. That still left 500,000 people with nowhere to go. She looked around at her officers. All of them showed the same exhaustion and determination. They had been working non-stop for days, barely sleeping, pushing themselves to the limit. But none of them suggested giving up. What if we gave up our own safety margins completely? Kate Morrison said quietly. What if the crew volunteered to enter suspended animation? That would free up resources for more Varani passengers. That's incredibly dangerous, Sophie warned. Suspended animation is risky enough when you're prepared for it. Doing it quickly with minimal equipment on this many people? We could lose crew members. But it would save Varani lives, Kate insisted. Isn't that what we came here to do? Nicole considered it carefully. She couldn't order her crew to take those risks, but she could give them the choice. All hands, this is the captain, she announced over the ship-wide communication system. We have a proposal that could save additional Varani lives, but it requires significant personal risk from the crew. I'm calling a ship-wide vote. Anyone who wants to volunteer for suspended animation to free up resources, signal your willingness to your department heads. This is completely voluntary. No one will be punished for declining. She expected maybe 1/4 of the crew to volunteer, perhaps half if she was lucky. What she got was over 90%. Engineers, doctors, pilots, support staff, nearly everyone raised their hand to volunteer. The same pattern repeated across all 5 ships. Thousands of humans willing to risk their own lives for aliens they had just met. "They're all crazy," Ryan Blake's voice said over the communication link when he heard about it. Despite the distance, his concern came through clearly. "Nicole, you can't put your entire crew into suspended animation. Who's going to run the ships?" "We'll keep minimal operational crews awake," Nicole explained. "Enough people to handle navigation, engineering, and medical emergencies. Everyone else goes under. It's risky, but it'll let us fit another 100,000 passengers. That's still not enough." "I know. But it's something." The crews began implementing the plan immediately. Sophie Martinez and her medical team set up makeshift suspension systems throughout the ships. It wasn't elegant or comfortable, but it would work. Crew members said goodbye to friends and colleagues, knowing they might not wake up again. But none of them backed out. Lieutenant Chris Blake volunteered to enter suspension, but Nicole refused. "I need you awake and functional," she told him. "You're too valuable to the operation." Chris wanted to argue, but understood the necessity. Some people had to stay awake to keep the ship running. As the modifications continued, the situation on Varan grew more desperate. The red sun grew more unstable, sending waves of radiation that forced the remaining Varani to shelter in protected facilities. Earthquakes shook the major cities. The storms intensified until they covered almost the entire planet. Time was running out fast. Eldest Kiara remained on the surface, refusing to evacuate while any of her people remained behind. She coordinated the remaining population, making sure that families stayed together and that the most vulnerable received whatever protection they could offer. Her skin colors showed calm determination even as her world fell apart around her. "You should come up to the ship," Kate Morrison urged her during one communication session. "You're their leader. They need you to survive." "I will not abandon them," Kiara said simply. "If we must die, we will die together. But I have hope, Kate Morrison of Earth. I have hope that you will find a way. You humans seem to specialize in achieving the impossible." With 50 hours left before the predicted solar event, the human ships had packed themselves beyond any reasonable capacity. Life support systems ran at 120% of rated capacity. Water and food were rationed strictly. Every available space held passengers. The ships groaned under the strain, and the crews worked frantically to keep everything functioning, but it still wasn't enough. After all the modifications and sacrifices, they had room for 3,500,000 Varani. That left 500,000 people on the dying planet with no way to save them. Nicole stood on the bridge of the Endeavor, staring at the numbers that refused to work no matter how many times she ran them. Ben Carter stood beside her, having refused to enter suspension because his expertise was too critical. Kate Morrison remained awake as well, unable to rest while the crisis continued. "We need a miracle," Nicole said quietly, and then they got 1. Warning alert sounded across the bridge. Ben Carter rushed to his station, checking sensors that showed something dropping out of FTL space at the edge of the system. "We have a ship arriving," he announced. "It's reading as human technology." It's the pathway," Kate finished. Her voice filled with wonder. The sixth ship emerged from FTL travel, its hull scarred and its systems clearly strained, but intact and functional. Captain Angela Park's face appeared on the communication screen, looking exhausted but triumphant. "Sorry we're late," Angela said with a tired smile. "We had some engine trouble. Traffic was terrible. Where do you want us?" Nicole felt relief wash through her so powerfully she had to grip her chair to stay standing. "Captain Park, you beautiful woman. How much passenger capacity do you have?" "If we implement all the modifications you've been using and push ourselves to the absolute limit, we can take 500,000. Maybe 550,000. That is, if you haven't filled up without us?" Nicole laughed, actually laughed for the first time in days. "No, we saved room. Get into orbit and start taking passengers immediately. We have about 40 hours left." The arrival of the pathway changed everything. The math suddenly worked. They could evacuate everyone, every single Varani, with the 6 ships working together. The news spread through the fleet and down to the planet's surface. Hope, which had been slowly dying, suddenly blazed back to life. Chief Engineer Megan Foster and her crew had performed a miracle of their own, repairing the damaged FTL drive while stranded in interstellar space. They had worked around the clock for days, replacing components, testing systems, and pushing the drive to its absolute limits to catch up to the fleet. Several of her engineers had injuries from accidents during the repairs. All of them were exhausted beyond measure. But they had made it. How did you do it? Ben Carter asked Megan over a private channel, engineer to engineer. We refused to fail, Megan said simply. We knew you needed us. We knew the Varani needed us. So we fixed the impossible problem and flew an untested drive at dangerous speeds to get here in time. Because that's what humans do. We don't quit. The final evacuation proceeded with renewed urgency. All 6 ships took on passengers as fast as the Varani could transport them from the surface. The human crews worked without rest, guiding scared aliens onto ships, helping them settle in, explaining systems, and offering whatever comfort they could. Sophie Martinez and her medical teams treated the last wave of passengers, many of whom showed serious injuries and illness from the deteriorating conditions. They worked in impossible conditions, treating patients in crowded corridors and makeshift medical spaces. But they saved lives that would otherwise have been lost. With 20 hours remaining, they hit a new problem. The ships were so overloaded that basic life support was starting to fail in some sections. Air circulation couldn't keep up. Temperature regulation struggled. Waste management systems operated beyond capacity. They were pushing the ships past any safe operating limits. Nicole made a decision that was either brilliant or suicidal. Reduce life support to the human crew sections, she ordered. Give the Varani passengers priority. Crew members will use emergency oxygen supplies and environmental suits if necessary. We can handle discomfort better than they can. The human crews immediately implemented the order without complaint. They gave up heating in their quarters. They used bottled oxygen when air quality dropped. They wore environmental suits during their shifts to protect themselves from poor air quality. Every resource that could be redirected to the passengers, they redirected. The Varani watched this in amazement. They saw humans suffering to protect them, giving up safety and comfort.